our Water Commission meeting of May 18. Why don't we have roll call, please?
Chair Young,
Here.
Vice Chair Cooney,
Present.
Commissioner Snyder,
Here.
Commissioner Keller,
Here.
Commissioner Davis.
Here.
And Council Liaison Sneddon.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Hagmark, any changes to the agenda?
Chair, there are no changes to the agenda.
Okay. And now's the time for public comment. If anyone in the audience or online or on the phone wishes to address the commission on anything that's not on the agenda, now is the time to do so. Do we have anybody?
I see no hands raised.
Okay, and I don't see anyone in the audience. So we will move on to the consent items, item 5. Mr. Hagmark.
Mr. Chair, we've got 4 items on the consent calendar. Happy to answer any questions that the commission may have.
Go ahead.
Thank you. I do have just a quick question on the item C, ocean outfall monitoring. If that includes at the outfall and then some sort of control sites or sites where there's not expected to be any influence from the outfall, so that you would have a comparison between those two?
Commissioner Keller, that's a fantastic question, and this is a monitoring program that we do every 5 years,
yeah.
and I'm not certain about that, but I could follow up with you more information.
Okay, thank you.
Any other comments?
Not a comment, but on a motion, I will be abstaining on the minutes since I wasn't here.
Okay. And I just have a request on item C, that when the report is completed, that it come through the Water Commission so we could see what the results are of the offshore monitoring. So other than that, how about a motion? A motion to adopt.
I move to approve
Okay, the consent items.
the consent items, yeah.
Okay, in a second?
I'll second it.
All right. Okay.
Commissioner Davis,
Roll call, please.
Commissioner Davis.
I'll be abstaining on item.
I'm sorry.
On item A, but yes on B through D.
Commissioner Keller,
Yes.
Commissioner Snyder,
Yes.
Vice Chair Cooney,
Yes.
and Chair Young.
Yes. Okay, great. Let's move on to administrative items. Item 6A, environmental consulting services for the Vic Trace Reservoir Replacement Project. Mr. Hagmark.
Yes, Chair Young, thank you. Typically, I don't bring these, I'd put this item on the consent calendar, but it is the first contract for the Vic Trace Reservoir Replacement, which is anticipated to be over a $40 million project. So I wanted to bring the project here. Kelly Brokers at one of our new engineers, and I wanted to have her kind of walk you through kind of the general plan for the project and answer any of your questions at this time. And with that,
Thank you, Joshua, and nice to meet all of you. I'm pleased to present to you for the first time the Vic Trace Reservoir Replacement Project. So throughout this presentation, I will discuss the background of the project, the need and purpose, the planned work and planned phases, also the timeline, the anticipated budget, next steps, and I will also leave time at the end for questions. So this picture here shows the Vic Trace Reservoir property. It is 15 acres, and you can see the reservoir itself is the white rectangle in the middle. It's about 1 acre in size. It's located west of downtown between Cliff Drive and West Carrillo Street. And I will discuss the property a little bit further over the next couple of slides. The Vic Trace property, as I mentioned, is 15 acres, and it is owned by the Public Works Department. It's a partially buried reservoir, so some of it is exposed. It was built in 1956, which is the slide shown there, with mostly concrete. It was designed to be 10 million gallons in water storage, and it receives water from the north via the city's transmission main from the Cater Water Treatment Plant. And water leaves the reservoir actually to the south and distributes water to the low-level pressure zone. So This pressure zone is one of the city's largest. It distributes water to the downtown neighborhood, the Mesa, the West Side, and Hidden Valley. And essentially, because of the size of the reservoir, 10 million gallons, the pressure zone it serves, it's a critical facility and a backbone storage unit for the city. And because of its age, it has been prioritized for replacement.
One of the unique things about this reservoir, not only that it serves a vast portion of our community, but so water gravities from Kachuma to Cater, and then gravities from Cater to Victrace, and then down to our community. So it's a very impressive setup, all kind of built around gravity, but it does serve a really critical role for the community.
So this picture here is kind of zooming in on the site itself today. And you can see the property serves several other facilities. So the first being the city leases an area of the property sort of to the northeast for radio equipment. So that's a set aside for county and city radio facilities, including the city's AMI water antenna. There's also a valve house structure near the driveway that houses the influent and effluent valves for the site. And lastly, La Cornea Park on Dolores Drive to the west. That park is a public works owned park. It is zoned as a neighborhood park, and we are in communication with the Parks and Recreation Department about the project and its proximity to the park. So you can see that due to the reservoir's hilltop location, its proximity to the surrounding neighborhood, and anticipated heavy construction impacts that take place during reservoir construction, we are going to approach this multi-phased with a lot of different activities, all to essentially ensure we get public feedback throughout the process. The work for this project can be broken down into 4 phases: the environmental phase, community outreach, design, and construction. All these phases will be done simultaneously and in parallel. So the first phase is environmental work. Phase 1 will be in an on-site investigation, and this is the contract we're bringing to council on June 13th. So essentially, phase 1 environmental work will be on-site investigation, and those findings will inform phase 2, which will be the CEQA and permitting process. We anticipate a CEQA EIR, or an environmental impact report. Second, community outreach. We're in process of soliciting proposals and will award a community outreach contract later this summer. They will be developing our strategic planning document, which will be a plan that will be implemented throughout the project. And then lastly, design and construction. The design contract will hopefully be awarded early next year. Design will take about 2 years or so, and then construction on site won't start until maybe 2026 or 2027. So this is the outlook or the timeline for the project as a whole. And what's important to see here is that these projects, or I guess these phases, will be happening simultaneously. These are really important activities that require a lot of coordination and a lot of constant communication between these groups. So for example, a new environmental finding on the project will inform the design layout, and then the outreach firm needs to be looped in on whether or not that triggers public feedback or how to anticipate how we're going to reach out to the public regarding that change. And then essentially what we'll do is environmental will be first. That'll inform the design when we go out to bid. And then later, all 3 teams will be working in tandem before we start construction on site in 2026. As for budget, the city developed a water distribution infrastructure plan in 2020, which estimated the project to be $42 million. This is a planning level figure and was exclusive to just the reservoir replacement itself. City staff have identified several other activities that we might want to loop in with construction, And the figure is a couple years old now, so the project cost is likely to be a little higher. We're going to finance the project with a drinking water state revolving fund low-interest loan, which the city has done for many other projects. But we're also going to seek other federal and state grants that may qualify for this project. We will be visiting Water Commission several times on this project over the next year or two or three. So the first being, we are here today to initiate our on-site environmental investigation. Staff have selected Rincon Consultants to perform Phase 1 environmental work. That work will be completed this summer and will give us the findings we need to form a request for proposal for design. Secondly, and as I mentioned before, we will be awarding an outreach planning contract later this summer. Next, we will award the design contract early next year, and we will begin the application for SRF funding shortly thereafter. So essentially, when we go to Water Commission for this project, we are welcoming any public feedback and any commission feedback to improve the design, the implementation, and overall to improve the success of the project. So with that, I'm happy to answer any questions, and thank you.
Any questions from the commission? Is that?
Yes, I have a question.
Go ahead.
Okay, so thank you. Sorry. Yes, thank you very much. Very nice presentation. I remember there was some talk about having some solar on it. Is that still part of that plan to consider it within the design?
Yes, so we are considering solar. Part of the design contract at the beginning will be doing sort of a sandbox exercise to see first how we can locate the new tanks. And then with whatever hilltops maybe or slopes we have available, we will see if we can do solar or maybe battery storage too.
So one of the things the city has been blessed with is we have pretty much every different type of reservoir design that's ever existed, we've experimented with. And having crawled through most of these reservoirs, I can say the ones that tend to be the lowest maintenance are the ones that we bury. They tend to have less cracking, less damage, less vandalism, all of the things that kind of go along with owning a reservoir, security issues. And so without preempting where this will take us, I hope that we will end up with 2 buried reservoirs on site, which will allow us, assuming we can design for the structural requirements of that, will allow us better use of the site if we do that.
Cora?
I know we've talked about in the past the importance of this site as a potential location for like climate adaptation of the city's water system moving forward. And I was just wondering if you could talk about how that is integrated or considered in this design and construction process.
It is a very good question, and it's one that I've been challenged with because obviously the core function here is to get the reservoirs in. And I'm hoping our consultant can help us guide how we go about laying the groundwork that 20 years from now, 30 years from now, the site may have additional demands or needs that the city needs from it. How do we do that without completely bogging down and derailing the core project, which is the reservoir replacement? So like you, I'm hoping to kind of figure out how exactly we inform, because I think where we end here, I would like to obviously get the reservoirs replaced, but I'd like the community to know at the end of the day that we have these long-range plans. And so if someone is purchasing a home in that community, they understand that there's the use of that property could be changing in the next 20 or 30 plus years as the climate impacts take hold here.
Can you just remind me of the timing with, I know we talked in the last commission meeting about some of that climate adaptation planning that's happening, is like, how does the timing line up with that?
So we do not have any imminent impacts. So in the next 20 or 30 years, we didn't have anything of significant consequence as a result of climate change or sea level rise, I should say. It was out beyond that horizon that we started to see those impacts. So I think at this point, I think we're in that spot where we have plenty of time to prepare and plan for that. And again, one of the things that we're going to be doing is establishing that monitoring. So the plan will be based on certain indicators. So if sea level rise picks up for whatever reason, that our plan will be associated with certain milestones in that. And so if that speeds up, then we'll react to that. So we'll have kind of a adaptive plan.
Got it.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Question I have is, what environmental issues do we anticipate having to contend with?
So less around like any endangered species or biological concerns. It's actually, most of the environmental impacts will be during construction. So dust, noise, truck trips. So the site itself doesn't have any significant resources on it that we know of yet. That will be part of phase one. But the EIR anticipation is mostly based on during construction impacts.
Okay.
Based on the original construction drawings, it appears that this was a taller hill and was shaved off. So the reservoir sits on partial fill. So the, what would that be? The west end, I guess, of the reservoir is on fill. So a lot of the top of the site has been disturbed, but certainly we'll be looking for any type of Chumash significance on site as well. And what's interesting with the site too, it's actually pretty, elevation change across the site is pretty significant. I
Yeah.
don't know if you remember offhand what the
slope is.
what the low and high and low is of the site.
No, but I mean, we even engaged a contractor about the slope because we were a little concerned about the equipment and the slope. And they even said it's kind of at the tip of sort of what they're comfortable with for their equipment. But essentially, it slopes down to Dolores into that park. It's very steep.
Ms. Broken, I actually explored Dolores Park, which actually has no,
Sign.
there's no sign and there's nothing there. It looks like it was two building pads. It was intended to be two properties, and that was abandoned. But it is very steep. There is no access, no ADA access for sure. I would argue it's difficult for even people just walking into the site. It's pretty steep. So the whole park name is really confusing to me. It doesn't look like it looks pretty native. So, but anyway, we'll be exploring all that and exactly what the community sees out of that area.
So I take it what's there is going to be deconstructed and removed off-site. You're going to
Demo.
demo, you're going to dig the hole somewhat deeper. What's going to replace that during the time that is being demoed and replaced?
Very good question. We'll be working on that. No, that's a very good question.
Commissioners only ask very good questions.
And then we have it's on our radar, and it'll come down to. I mean, when we did this with the Sheffield Reservoir project, and we had to actually put in an above ground temporary steel tanks to accommodate it while we did construction. Not sure what we're going to do here yet. But as we've kind of told the story, this is a critical site, so it's not like you can just not have a reservoir here. There are maybe 2 months out of the year when it's wet and cold where we potentially could meet demands from Cater. And that's one of the reasons why we do want to complete the Cater Reservoir Resiliency Project, which will add additional tankage there, storage there. But that's going to be a challenge of construction because where the existing reservoir is ideally where you'd likely put the new reservoirs. So, yeah.
Okay, and then
Open heart surgery.
with the demolition and I take it the transport of materials off-site, how do you minimize disruption to the surrounding neighborhoods? Because, I mean, looking at the photograph here, that's a big thing.
Right.
There's going to be a lot of soil removed, I take it, and certainly what's there is going to be large, and when it's demolished, it'll have a lot of truckloads leaving, departing.
Right, I'm not going to dismiss that there won't be, but underneath that roof is a big hole right now where the current reservoir sits, right? So, and we've done our modeling and we know we need an additional 10 million. We're hoping we could reduce the size, and that's not going to happen. So there will be truck trips, but what is misleading is there's a giant Costco-size hole underneath that roof, and that roof is roughly 4 or 5 feet above grade, but the rest of the reservoir is roughly 20+ feet below grade. And so there will be material that needs to be removed, concrete that needs to be broken up, but we've got a good hole to start with.
Right.
But certainly back in the 1950s, when there was no one living on the hill, construction, noise, and earth moving was a lot easier.
But all that material is going to move through residential areas to get to its final destination.
And that'll be what we look at in the environmental, is what is the appropriate truck hauling routes
Okay.
to minimize the impacts, and then what offsets can be done. I'm sure there'll be windows when trucking can occur, probably avoiding the 8 a.m., early morning rush hour, and then that late evening rush hour. So there'll be defined windows of operations.
Great. Cora?
To clarify, so did you say that you're going to expand the storage capacity at that site?
No, we were hoping we could decrease it
Oh, I
after we did the work, and unfortunately fell. Not unfortunately, but it said if we kept it at 10 million, it actually would allow us to potentially look at other smaller reservoirs and consolidating them and not having to replace them in the future by keeping this one at 10.
Got it.
Yeah.
Great. All right. If there's no other questions, we need a motion to approve.
Public comment.
Oh, yeah, public comment. Do we have any public comment?
I see no hands raised.
Okay. Thank you, Dave, for the reminder. Now we'll take a motion.
Motion to approve staff recommendation.
Second?
Okay, roll call on the motion.
Commissioner Davis,
Yes.
Commissioner Keller,
Yes?
Commissioner Snyder,
Yes.
Vice Chair Cooney,
Yes.
and Chair Young.
Yes. Okay, thank you for that report. Moving to item 6B, water supply update and repeal of Stage 2 water shortage alert. Mr. Hagmark.
I'm so happy to be here with this. This is, since taking over this role in 2013, it's just been a constant doom and gloom on water supply situations, and it's just so nice to be before you today and have some really positive news and to be able to roll back our water shortage alert. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Ms. Corey to deliver that.
Good morning, Chair Young, Water Commissioners. My name is Dakota Corey, and I'm the Water Supply and Services Manager. And Mr. Hagmark stole my thunder for my intro, which is, this is a great news story. And as you all know, for the last 10 years, we've been doing these water supply updates twice a year, and they've been complicated. And this one is a fun story, so let's go ahead and just get started. So for today's presentation, we'll do a recap of winter 2023 and some of the storms. We'll look at our current water supply status. We'll look at our strategy for using our water supply in the next several years. And then I have a recommendation for council that I hope that the Water Commission can approve to recommend to council. So first, let's look at winter 2023. So as you know, it was a wet winter. We had 240% of normal precipitation at Gibraltar Reservoir with over 60 inches of rain. We saw similar averages at Lake Cachuma, over almost 200% of normal, and downtown Santa Barbara at 202% of normal, with over 35 inches at both sites. Here's a graph that we've seen before. This has rainfall back to 1968. The red line represents sort of average or normal rainfall, and then the green lines are considered above average rainfall, blue is normal, and brown is below average. And so if we focus on the lower right-hand corner of the graph, you can see the drought period that we've been surviving through since 2011, which is the last time that Lake Cachuma spilled. And now here for 2023, we have our yellow bar, which shows a very above normal precipitation year, which has really been a game changer. This is just kind of a look at where we came from. So on the right, going into this winter, this was the California Drought Monitor from December 2022. You can see that the entire state was lit up and was experiencing everywhere from exceptional to severe drought conditions. Now on the left, we have our May 2023 California Drought Monitor. You can see that there are no drought conditions in the majority of the state, with just some abnormally dry sections of the eastern part of the state and the north and the south.
I can really appreciate how the exceptional drought area is now Tulare Lake.
And as always with these graphics, although it's not as important now, I like to point out that the drought monitor looks at physical conditions in the environment, so stream flow, soil moisture contact, snowpack, which we all know are all showing record levels, not necessarily individual water supply situations with individual water agencies. So this is another graph that you've seen before. This is our total production going back to 1985. You can see a couple of different drought periods in this graph. So in the late 80s, early 90s, you see our production fall off dramatically in response to that drought period. It did start to creep back up, but it never reached those historical levels that it was in the mid 80s. We continued along for a good, like 20 years until we hit the next drought in the 2011-12 time period, and you see the demand fall off again. And then this is where we've been existing for the last several years. What's probably most interesting in this graph right now is on the right-hand side, you can see the blue dotted line, which is our projected demands from our Enhanced Urban Water Management Plan. And you can see since we developed those demands in 2019, we were tracking very closely with them. It was a great planning tool. I anticipate that that's still going to be a great planning tool, but you can see in the near term, as a result of the precipitation that we've received, our demands have really fallen off. We haven't had to water for several months, which is great. And this is another graph that you've seen before. This doesn't look very interesting, but we'll build on it. So the upper line is our 2013 baseline production, and then our new baseline of 2020, which corresponds pretty closely with our Enhanced Urban Water Management demand projections. Then we can bring in actual production from 2021, so that's your blue line. You can see that, again, we were tracking really close with those 2020 baseline demands. And then if we bring in 2023 actual, in the turquoise at the bottom, you can see, again, that we're significantly below our original pre-drought demand of 2013, but even significantly below the 2020 baseline demand. So kind of same story, different graph. And currently, for the month of April, our conservation compared to that 2013 baseline is 36%. The story here, kind of long-term, that's more interesting is that since this last drought period, our customers have really embraced conservation as a way of life, and we've seen on average 30% conservation since that pre-drought period. So we really have restarted a new normal in terms of what it means to use water in the city. So let's take a look at our individual water supplies, and I have some fun pictures and some video in here for you too, because we should celebrate. So Cachuma Reservoir, as of May 8th, had over 195,000 acre feet in it. It's actually above capacity, so the Bureau is practicing what they call gate holding right now, which means that the water is up above the 753-foot elevation mark that we consider full, but the gates actually extend a little higher, so the water's pushing up against those gates right now. The spill started on January 20, 2023, and that started as an operational spill. So the Bureau of Reclamation started releasing water out of the outlet works on January 20th, and that was the official start of the spill. It's currently still spilling, and so because of that, we have what we call surplus conditions, and that's really great news for the city. So what that means is anytime that we're in surplus conditions, any water that the city or the other Cachuma member agents use from Lake Cachuma is essentially free, which means it's not deducted from our annual allocation. So we do have 100% allocation for water year 2023, which is our 8,277 acre feet, but we're not deducing that by using our Cachuma water right now. So currently our water supply strategy is to use as much free water as we can, and we're really just pulling from Cachuma right now. We anticipate that the spill will last through June. I'll go back real quick because that last bullet is kind of important. During the spill, we did spill our stored carryover water. So at the time of the spill, we had about 16,000 acre feet of water, or, year and a half's worth of water stored in Lake Kachuma. That had been an excellent resource for us as we were weathering these dry years. But with the current surplus condition and then our new 100% allocation from a water supply perspective, even though we lost what sounds like a big number or a big volume of water, we're still in very good shape in terms of the water we have available to us at Lake Kachuma. So this is a video that was taken by county staff showing Kachuma as it started to spill, and it's pretty incredible. So this is coming down the spillway. There's the gates up above. And then that's the outlet works from a kind of strange angle. But it's pretty impressive. Looking down from the gates, downstream. There's a nice aerial view, and you can see how nice and full that reservoir is. They really have it all the way up to the tip top. And another angle. Kind of cool to see, too, down the Santa Clara River. You can see how it really was kind of in flood conditions at that point. It's been a very clearing storm, so a lot of the arundo and the debris and everything that had built up has been scoured out, and the stream bed is a lot more open and clear. Joshua and I took a little field trip a week or two ago and got to check out some of the downstream sites. Kind of neat. Oh, I don't want to start the video over. To go to our next slide. Okay, so moving on to Gibraltar Reservoir, storage as of May 8th is just over 4,600 acre feet. It's also at 100% capacity. It started spilling on January 5th, and the picture on the right is from that first storm in January. That is a serious amount of water coming out of that reservoir. It is still currently spilling. We still have significant inflows coming in. And the plan in terms of near-term management of this resource is once that surplus condition at Lake Kachuma stops, we want to shift our focus to utilizing as much Gibraltar water as we can. One, to utilize the water before the quality degrades over the summer, and two, to draw down the reservoir in case we have another wet year that we can fill it up again. Also, any utilization of Gibraltar Reservoir allows us to maximize the utility of our hydroelectric plant, so that's always a good thing. And these are just a couple of photographs that I found really interesting. On the left, you can see the dam after that first storm in January. The water is very full of debris. It's since cleared out, so it doesn't look like that anymore. One of the things that I'm really curious to see is our next bathymetric survey over the summer. So clearly a lot of debris came down with these storms through the watershed. Both Lake Kachuma and Gibraltar Reservoir had buildup of debris. You can even see it in this picture kind of building up behind the dam. But also the flows were so significant that sometimes at Gibraltar we get some scouring and it pulls some of that built up debris out, or the sediment out. And so I'm curious to see if we get a net gain or loss of capacity when we do our next survey. And then on the right, that is Devil's Canyon Creek shortly after the storm, and you can see some really good flow coming out of there too.
I wonder if that doesn't present an opportunity to augment scouring, to maybe gain some capacity back in the reservoir. Or is it so insignificant it doesn't even make any sense?
Yeah, I think it's the windows in which you can do it are so difficult, and I think as long as it's sediment laden due to a storm, that is okay. But if we were, I don't know if you're implying that if we were to
Stir it up.
stir it up, I can only imagine that there would be difficult hurdles to adding additional sediment to it, whether or not it would actually make a difference for anything living downstream, aquatic or not. It's an interesting question, but I can imagine it would be complicated to try and navigate because it is a small window.
Yeah. Another thing that's a little tricky is Gibraltar is located upstream of Kachuma, so what we send down builds up in Kachuma, and we want to maintain storage capacity there. Kachuma's really benefited from the debris basin qualities of Gibraltar. they don't have as bad of an issue with debris.
So has the water quality now gotten better in terms of sediments? So it's
Absolutely,
pretty clear,
yeah. It's ready to divert. Again, we're just trying to take advantage of the Kachuma surplus condition right now, but it's good, clean water. We're ready to use it. So on the state water project, this is a huge good news story. We started out in December with a 5% allocation, which you'll probably remember from presentations past. That's been our historical low on the project for several years. So the city had 165 acre-feet allocation from the state water project. With the storms and then especially the snowpack in the Sierras, the Department of Water Resources, they ramped up their allocation over time, but they finally landed on 100% allocation, which is really significant. And we went from expecting 0% allocation and kind of hearing that the project was almost like such in debt that even if we got some rain, we weren't going to see any allocation to 100% allocation. So really kind of this historic, exciting thing. And I'll talk a little bit more in my next presentation about how CCWA navigated all that, because it got interesting for a minute with looking at water spilling out of San Luis Reservoir. We, as the city, had a decent amount of carryover water in San Luis Reservoir. It was looking like it was going to spill. We also had increasing allocation from the current year, and so we took 2,000 acre-feet of our water on the state water project and paid back all of our water debt from our 2016 exchange with AVEC. So we have no more water debt. We have about 2,400 acre-feet of current year allocation stored in San Luis, so that's not subject to spill this year. It'll turn to carryover water next year, so we want to look at opportunities of how to utilize that if we're going to have another wet winter.
I had a question about paying the water debt. How are they able to take that water? Like, I know it's like some of it's not, it's like there's paper water and then actual water going to that facility. So how did that work this winter?
So I am not a huge expert on this either, but AVEC is another state water contractor, just like Central Coast Water Authority. What I'm not certain about is if the water was actually delivered via the California Aqueduct down physically to AVEC, or if it was a paper transfer, so like their account became more whole than ours. Do you have a sense of that, Mr. Hagmark?
I don't. I can certainly look into that because it was a little bit of magic. My Ray Stokes, because he got in there before they were thinking San Luis was going to spill, we were able to get this transaction done. I think if AVEC knew that spill condition, I don't know that they would have been as excited to take the water. But at the time, I don't think we were contemplating a spill condition.
No, we just saw the opportunity to pay back our debt and went
Right.
for it, yeah.
Yeah. So it was a little bit of
Presumably they
timing.
didn't want 2,000 acre-feet of water at that time.
I think at the time we jumped on it, it was uncertain. The faucet could have turned off, and it could have been an average year at that point. Yeah, I think a lot of it was timing. I think if we would have called them in April, they would have said no.
Well, and AVEC's a totally different water agency than us. One of the other things that they operate is a large groundwater bank. And so they may have brought that water down and physically stored it, so maybe it wasn't as big of a threat for them. But again, that's just speculation. We'd have to confirm what happened to the molecules of water.
So somebody that loans us water has the ability to say, I don't want to accept the repayment this year?
I'd have to go back and look at our contract, but there's certain windows in which we can take delivery and or return water. Certain conditions have to be met, and I'd have to take a look at, and each one is a little different, and it depends on their capacity to take it.
Right. Okay.
So these are just some graphics that monitor the state water project. I wanted to put some pictures and graphics in here to just show you how sort of profound and exciting this has been. On the left, you see the storage at the various reservoirs that make up the state water project. The blue bar represents how much water is in the lake, with yellow being, free capacity, or it hasn't filled up yet. And you can see there's kind of a green horizontal line that goes across each of those bars, and that represents the historical average. So you can see that most of the large reservoirs are full and above the historical average on the project, and this is what led us to our 100% allocation. And then on the right, you can see snowpack totals. The snowpack surveys are monitored in kind of 3 regions in the Sierras, the northern, central, and southern. The southern Sierras are actually the region that got hit the heaviest in these storms, and they're at 244% of average snowpack. So that was record-breaking snow in the southern Sierras. But even up north, they were at 152%. So we saw significant snowfall in the Sierras with these storms this winter.
You know, and having grown up in the Central Valley, I can speak to like Pine Flat and Millerton. What they're doing there is they're dumping water, trying to use the reservoir as a buffer right now, as this starts to melt. So that's why they're extremely low. But I'm confident those will be full by the end of the summer.
Yeah, that's a really good point. A lot of these major reservoirs on the State Water Project actually fill up with snow melt. So you see their peak volumes in like July rather than like April or May after the winter rains. So I think Mr. Hegmark's exactly right. We'll see those fill up even more as the snow starts to melt.
Can I ask a question about the historical average? How far back are we looking on that? Like historical average for 200 years or 50 years or?
That's a good question. It does not say on the graph. But I would say it's probably more like in the 50-year time frame. I mean, thinking about how long the project's been around and some of these reservoirs. So what's been really interesting about this entire wet season for Mr. Hegmark and I is all of a sudden, like, we've had to take almost 180-degree mind shift for what we're thinking about in terms of how we manage our water supply. And that conversation gets really interesting with desal. So as you know, desal has an important role for drought preparation, response, and recovery, and we've really been utilizing it the last several years to build up our carryover storage in Cachuma as reserves for continued dry conditions. We were able to shut down the plant in February and March this winter after the storms to perform some needed maintenance on the facility. Moving forward, we're asking some questions about, is there an opportunity to shut it down for a while and save some money around electricity? Long term, as we know from our enhanced urban water management plan, it's still a really important facility in our portfolio. And we're definitely planning in that capacity. But year to year, if we see kind of a string of wet years, are there some trigger points that would make good sense to go ahead and put that in a standby mode to save some money, do needed repairs, et cetera? So new questions, new problems to think about as we have all this new water.
Cora?
How easy is it to like turn it on or off? And are there ways to make it more flexible?
That is a fantastic question, and delicately walk this. Our contractor had led us to believe it was a lot more easier to turn off than it really is, because they do that at other facilities in Israel, but apparently ours does not have the full capabilities. So we're working through those issues. It does have the ability to shut off. It doesn't have the ability to turn down as much as we had hoped it would. But we are working through those issues with them of, is there a capital project that would give us that flexibility? And I'd like to describe it like most highly sophisticated piece of equipment, think of your car, they don't like to just sit there for months and months on end. And so one of the things that we're exploring is, for example, electrical rates go up June 1st and they come down October 1st. And there's an opportunity there, 4-month window, where probably most likely, if you're going to take it down, would be the best time to take it down. Do maintenance to it. But what does that mean for a highly complex piece of equipment, and how do we make sure that it comes back on October 1st? So we're working through that issue. We're also looking at the potential electrical savings, because it's definitely higher. Just in general, not the amount of electricity, but the cost of electricity between June and October is typically the same amount as it is for the other 8 months of the year.
Wow.
Yeah. So 4 months cost you the same as 8 months. So it gives you kind of a perspective of how SCE's rates are. And as you may or may not be aware, as of March 1st, rates went up again. And this was part of my manager's report, but they went up a lot. And interestingly enough, I don't know if folks have had a chance to look at it, almost 30% increase, and not where you'd think they went up. They did at the high tier, so if you're using it between 4 and 9 every day, that price stayed about the same. It actually went up for the off-peak and what they consider super off-peak, and I know their terminology is really strange. Those are the rates that have gone up almost 30%. So really kind of odd with that messaging of we want you to use power off peak times. So it's going to be a big hit for our customers in their home use, but also for us as a municipality.
Can I jump on to that question and sort of say, so that it's super interesting with the utilities and with shutting it down and stuff, but what about the staffing at the desal plant? Like are we able to put people into other city jobs, or are you laid off for 4 months, or what does that look like in terms of, because I imagine if you aren't going to pay someone for 4 months, no one's going to come back to that job
Right.
every year, which would be bad.
That would be bad. No, that's a fantastic question, and I've come to appreciate that's very specialized labor to operate this, just like our water treatment plant and our wastewater treatment plant. And so I think right now the way I'm viewing this is it would be a couple months shutdown. As we shut down from February and March. There was plenty of maintenance activities. We've been operating that facility since 2017 and haven't taken it down. So taking it down and doing some deep cleaning and maintenance, those staff were busy. Everyone was busy. When you start talking potentially a 4-month or a 6-month shutdown, I think there's probably enough work to keep everybody busy for a month or two. But the question becomes, what do those staff do? Should it be operated with city staff? We certainly have plenty of things we could do at El Estero and Decatur to work on. For IDE, I'm guessing they would probably send them down to Carlsbad to do maintenance down there, although we will be paying as though they are here. And that's, that price isn't going to change for that. Yeah.
Just to follow up on all of those things, when we were doing the enhanced water master plan, we had come out of that talking about using desal as a base supply all the time at one point. That said, our plan is simply adaptive management, and what I'm hearing is we're learning a lot as to how it fits into the overall equation, and we're still in that learning curve.
We are, and I think this is, again.
And we hadn't had a big dump of rain before to actually see how that operates in terms of the conjunctive use.
Right, yeah. We are learning a lot, and I think on this issue, we tend to be at the tip of the spear for the state because the issues we're facing, similar to recycled water, we're still running the recycled water plant right now. It does not financially make sense to run it. We should be shutting down and using surface water. But similar issues of turning it off and being how to bring a complex piece of equipment back on has been challenging us. So we're asking the same questions there. When we get to doing potable reuse, same issue. What do you do with this highly complex piece of equipment when you do have these wet years? And again, I'm not talking shutting it down for years here. We're talking about months. I don't know. We're learning here, and I think we're going to get a lot of questions from others who are going to be coming up against the same issue. What do you do? And at some case, it's kind of the cost of that water security. It's kind of what comes along with it. But I think there are things that we can do to get the most out of it, kind of leveraging that.
Yeah, and I just wanted to add in response to that question, I think what's interesting too here, and this is something that I'm still working on in my mind, is there's sort of the year-to-year response and response to weather, and we know in Southern California weather can be all over the map, but then the Enhanced Urban Water Management Plan was really looking long range, right? And so that philosophy of having desal as a base supply long range still stands, but are there efficiencies that we can take advantage of year to year, operating the plant a little bit differently? Yeah, and we're still learning.
Did IDE, were they involved in the design of the plant?
Yes.
They were. And they told us then it would be flexible?
Yeah, we actually have in our contract the ability to turn it down or turn it off for a year. Our contract has it, they can turn it off for a year, and there's a price for turning it off for a year. But I think they and us have concerns that if they turn it off for a year, I don't know they'd be able to get it back on very easily.
So it sounds like some type of misunderstanding
Yeah.
with what they thought.
We're learning curve.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
Is
All right.
that technology, I mean, is that just part of like the development of desal technology and the ability for it to improve over time? I mean, there's just not that much experience in California with like improving that technology. Do you think it'll get better?
I do think it'll get better. And one of the things, as you know, we work with the NAWI, National Alliance of Water Innovation, and they've been getting a lot of funding from Department of Energy to do more research in this area. And it's exciting because we actually have one of their PhD students who's going to come spend the summer with us, boot camp. He got the theoretical down and wants to come get some practical experience. So it's going to come spend the summer, and that's out of his kind of, and we'll report back on to the Water Commission on this. What he's going to do is a deep dive into desal and try and identify where the gaps are in technology, and potentially what the upside benefits would be of being able to turn down, turn off, having more flexibility with desal, and also where the biggest bang for your buck would come in energy improvements. So I'm really excited to have that kind of horsepower and backing. He'll have other folks supporting him remotely, but he will be here for somewhere between 4 and 10 weeks here with us. So,
Great.
yeah.
So moving on to another one of our supply sources, groundwater. You'll recall, I don't remember when it was, it might have been fall last year, that we were excited to present a new groundwater basin map. I thought that one was really ugly, and so did some of my colleagues. And so one of my colleagues said, hey, can I make a new groundwater map? So I have a new and improved groundwater map to present to you, which I find much more aesthetically pleasing. So just to orient ourselves with our groundwater basins, the gray layer in this map represents our water service area. On top of that, you see a green and blue area. The green shape is our foothill groundwater basin, and the blue shape is our storage unit 1 and storage unit 3 groundwater basins. The pink over on the far right is Montecito Water District, or Montecito groundwater basin, and then the blue on the left is the Goleta basin. And then you'll see that each of our production wells are labeled with a little triangle there in the different basins. So groundwater, as you know, is a conjunctive use supply for us, so we utilize it when other supplies are low. We did start pumping groundwater again last summer in anticipation of another dry year. We were just pumping from storage unit 1, the wells that feed the Ortega groundwater treatment plant. As soon as it started raining, we turned all those wells off. We do continue to monitor both water levels, especially in Foothill Basin, and seawater intrusion in storage unit 1, and I'm going to show you some graphics of that data here in just a minute. We still have water in the basin, so if something were to magically happen and everything dries up next year, that's still a resource to us, and it's also recovering. And we did reinstate our pilot groundwater injection study at the San Roque well, looking at the opportunity to recharge our Foothill groundwater basin with surplus water like we have today. So we're going through the process of studying that, and then we would submit those results to the State Water Resources Control Board, and if they approve it, then we could have an active groundwater replenishment program. The volume of water that we can really replenish is pretty small, but still a cool opportunity for us to utilize our basins to the best of our abilities. So this looks at storage in the Foothill Basin, and the data goes back to 1980. On the bottom, you see pumping, and the red part of the bars is city pumping, and the green part of the bars is La Cumbre Mutual Water Company pumping. So you can see how pumping definitely affects groundwater levels, which are the lines in the top of the bar in the Foothill Basin. And if you focus over on the right, where I put a big red circle, you'll see that we've seen definite increasing trends in groundwater elevation within the Foothill Basin since we really turned the wells off in 2017. If you were to clean up some of the mess of this graph, you know, there's a lot of lines on there, and and you draw a horizontal line back to where we are now, we're about at like 2011, 2013 groundwater levels in the Foothill Basin. So we've seen quite a bit of recovery since our last big pumping period in this most recent drought. We're not back to the early 2000s levels yet, but definitely seeing upward trends. And you can see if you look really closely at the lines right at the end of the graph, there's a big upward trend this winter. So finally we got some infiltration into our basins, and we're seeing the results of that.
So what would be a completely full basin? If you look at the left side,
Yeah, so you can kind
elevation.
of see that peak in the early 2000s. That's what we're shooting for again. I'm not the blue line all the
140?
way over on the left that is at 180 surface elevation. I'd have to look further back at that record to see how that one got so high. But if we could get anywhere in the peak that we see in the early 2000s, I'd be feeling really good about the status of the Foothill Basin.
Above 140?
Yeah. Well, for that monitoring well. And, there's also the green line, that it doesn't go as high. What's interesting about monitoring wells is they're all compared against sea level, and so depending on where they're located geographically, it doesn't necessarily mean that there's more water in the blue line than there is in the green line. It's just where they're located in space, essentially. But you can see trends here, which is what I like about this graph. And then in our storage unit 1, which is our groundwater basin located under downtown, groundwater surface elevation recovers very quickly. So again, we have pumping in red on the bottom. We have the groundwater surface elevation and the lines up above. I circled the most recent history, and so you can see that we're really kind of back to normal in terms of groundwater surface elevation in this basin, but really what we're concerned about here is seawater intrusion. So I've got some data on that as well. We've done this before. Usually I show 3 maps or 3 monitoring wells. I'm just going to show 2 today. The red arrow points at the location of the first monitoring well that we're going to take a look at. So we're about halfway between the Pacific Ocean and for the Freeway 101 near the El Estero Water Resources Center. And if we look at the chloride level for that graph, you can see back in the mid-80s during the last major drought, we saw an increase in chloride concentrations. It tapered off as we stopped pumping the basin, and then it rose again, but not as high in this last drought. We're really not seeing a huge downward trend in seawater intrusion yet at this well, but we'll continue to monitor it. And then moving inland to just the other side of Highway 101, another thing to point out in this map is the little black triangles, which are a little bit hard to see, are our production wells. So we're still like halfway to our production wells from the ocean. Looking at that chloride data, you can see that we really don't have any seawater intrusion. So no cause for alarm, but we want to continue to monitor that and see the chlorides start to be pushed back out towards the ocean as we rest our basins. Finally, recycled water.
Could I just have a detailed question? So we're not doing any injection at all to hold back seawater. We don't need to, looking at these particular figures. Is that
No,
correct?
we don't need to, and we looked at the feasibility of that in our 2017 potable reuse study, and it definitely wasn't cost effective to kind of have like, a series of sentinel wells or something that would push that water out. So we just want to try to utilize the basin in a way that when we don't need that groundwater, we're letting it rest and recover on its own.
Good, thanks.
Yeah. Mr. Hagmark already touched on recycled water. We've been continuing to operate the plant. There's low demands due to our wet winter, since that's primarily a source for landscape irrigation. And recycled water still plays an important role in our portfolio in that it offsets potable water use for large landscapes. So we've made it through each of our supplies. I just want to quickly look at our strategy moving forward. Typically, when we have this discussion in dry years, I have a lot of detailed assumptions that went into my planning. I'm just going to overall say that my goal here was to still assume that all the rain turns off and we go right back into dry conditions for the next 3 years. But even under those assumptions, we still have plenty of water to meet our demands for the next 3 years. That assumes baseline demands from the Enhanced Urban Water Management Plan, which are suppressed currently. And we're just assuming that the drought is always right around the corner. We do plan to not pump our groundwater basins in those 3 years because we want to continue to let them recover. So my recommendation to council, which will go on June 13th, and I'm hoping to get support from you all today, is to repeal our Stage 2 water shortage alert. And that means that we'll just go back to our waste of water regulations that are in our municipal code, kind of our baseline use for water use efficiency and conservation. And I do want to say that conservation remains important. As we know, precipitation in California is just very unpredictable. And we could go right back into several dry years and we could start to use up these supplies that we have currently. So I want to commend our community for really understanding that and continuing to operate as if our water resources are important. This is just a graphical representation of what our plan will look like. We've all seen this many, many times before. The 3 bars on the right represent projected use of water. Everything to the left of that is historical. The different colors in the bar represent the different sources that we'll be utilizing. So you can see in the next 3 years, we intend to rely heavily on Cachuma water and Gibraltar water. We have quite a bit of state water, so it might make sense to bring some of that down in the next couple of years to, continue to stretch our Cachuma supplies. So I put a little in there. We'll kind of play that by ear to see how the next few years play out. But either way, we've come out of a long stretch of using very limited resources, and this looks all very comfortable and easy for me. So our recommendation is that council receives an update on the city's water supply condition, as you guys did today, and then we're going to ask them to adopt by reading of title only a resolution that will repeal our previous resolution, which enacted our Stage 2 water shortage alert.
Great.
And if you have any additional questions, I'm here.
Any questions? No questions. Okay. How about public comment? Do we have any?
There's no public comment.
All right. Well,
I move staff recommendation.
Second.
roll call?
Can I make a comment?
Sure. Oh, I didn't know that's what you were indicating there.
This is the most enthusiastic and light and buoyant I've seen you, Ms. Corey, and your presentations are so incredible, always upping the graphics and the information and how can you get the information across better, but I'm just so happy for you in the next 3 years. So thank you.
So when I ask for questions, I include comments in that. I mean, it's, okay.
Commissioner Davis?
Yes.
Commissioner Keller?
Yes?
Commissioner Snyder?
Yes.
Vice Chair Cooney?
Yes.
And Chair Young.
Yes. Great. Thank you for that. All right. Next item, 6C, Water Agency's update. Mr. Hagmark.
Yes, Chair Young, Commissioners, kind of wanted to do just a roundup here. We can kind of go through our various JPA or the organizations that we're involved with. Lots of stuff going on, lots of transition, again, going completely 180 with all the stuff we were planning to do in December. Just wanted to have Ms. Corey walk you through what we've been talking about, those various boards and commissions, and certainly check in with you all on this.
Thank you, Mr. Hagmark. Surprise, it's me again. Dakota Corey, Water Supply and Services Manager, and I'll be providing an update on our 3 water supply-related joint powers authorities that we participate in. And the overall theme here, just like our last presentation, was it's been wet out there, and that's what the agencies have been working on. So starting with the Cachuma Operation and Maintenance Board, or COME, it's a joint powers agency that was formed in 1956 through an agreement with the Bureau of Reclamation, and it really handed over the responsibility to operate, repair, and maintain all of the Cachuma project facilities, except for the dam, by the Cachuma member units, of which the city is one. Our partners, Cachuma member units, are Goleta Water District, Montecito Water District, and Carpinteria Valley Water District. And COME works very closely with reclamation staff and member units to ensure that our water supplies meet our daily demands. So COME initiatives in the early part of 2023, again, the theme here is storm response, but ahead of storm response, COME performed kind of a miracle, really, with their secured pipeline project. I know you've had updates on this project in the past, but the idea was when the lake levels drop very low, we can't pull water through our intake tower, and so the secured pipeline allows us to hook up to a barge that can pump that water and keep supplies available to the member units. Anticipating some storms coming around the corner, the contractor for Combe Cushman, again, performed like miracle work. They worked overtime, and they sunk that secured pipeline and got it all secured and hooked up literally like 48 hours before the storm started coming in and the lake started rising. They were pulling equipment out of the lake as the lake was coming up. So huge success. This is a huge accomplishment and will increase efficiency and save us all money as member agencies or member units when lake levels drop again and emergency pumping is needed. So this is a really important and exciting project. And just because the lake is full now and we might not use it right away, it's really great that we've got it installed. Since then, Comb's really been working on storm response cleanup and maintenance. Like all the other agencies, they're working closely with the federal government to secure FEMA funding for repairs related to the storms this winter. They're also implementing stage 2 of their water quality and sediment management study, and they're doing a source investigation for total organic carbon and phosphorus. And they also have an active fisheries and oak tree program which works to maintain and protect the habitat for the southern steelhead downstream of the dam. For the CCRB, or the Kachuma Conservation and Release Board, they're another joint powers agency that was formed in January 1973, and really their focus is still Lake Kachuma, but it's on water rights. So COMB focuses on operations, CCRB focuses on water rights, and the two big items that they're constantly working on are our water rights order that was issued in September 2019 by the State Water Resources Control Board, and the federal biological opinion, which was most recently issued in 2000 by the National Marine Fisheries Service. We anticipate a new biological opinion at some point in the future. Reclamation is currently working on preparing a new biological assessment in support of a new biological opinion. And so all of these have to do with how the Kachuma project is operated to protect both water rights and the southern steelhead in that interaction.
Quick question. You note in here that Carpinteria withdrew in 2011 from CCRB. Can you remind me why that happened? And then to kind of follow up to that is, do they do their own responses to the biological opinion and the water rights order?
I'll try and do this delicately. They backed out because of the costs. And now the other members bear the costs and they bear the benefits.
So they're a free rider? Okay. That was my question. Thank you.
So some of the major initiatives that CCRB has been working on is providing biological and hydrological technical support to help Reclamation develop 2 plans that comply with the new water rights order. So there's Table 1 in the new water rights order, which is release requirements during normal and dry years. So these releases are downstream releases for maintaining the steelhead population. And then there's the Term 19 study plan, which is the Table 2 releases, and that is for wet years. And this is our first wet year since that new water rights order. So there's a lot of emphasis on developing this Term 19 study plan and taking advantage of the data that we're able to collect this year, which is our first wet year. Something exciting that's happening in the Term 18 plan is COMB worked closely with USGS to install a new stream gauge. So this is where the 154 highway crosses the San Ynez River downstream of Bradbury Dam. And the stream gauge used to be located right near the bridge there. And what happens there is the river braids. And so it's got, little fingers that are kind of flowing down the river. That's a really hard way to measure stream flow when you've got all these little fingers. And so this new gauge is installed upstream a couple hundred yards. And here there's a clear channel and there's just one passage of the water through. So much more accurate data. Again, Mr. Hagmark and I went on a little field trip a few weeks ago. So I have a picture of the new collection station for that data. They're collecting water quality data and stream flow data at this station. And so the Term 18 plan will incorporate that as the official new data point for managing the downstream releases. And another thing that CCRB has been working on is they've been analyzing the fish releases that the Bureau has been making since 2005. And they've found that all of those releases are larger than were anticipated in both the 2000 biological opinion and the new water rights order. And it appears to disproportionately benefit our downstream water rights accounts. So you may have heard of the above Narrows account and the below Narrows accounts. There's all these sort of pots that different water molecules in Kachuma sit so that different agencies have access. And so these are our downstream users. And so there's a couple of things going on. One is that Reclamation is really concerned about making sure they hit their targets, or they're more comfortable exceeding the targets, and so they incorporate a buffer into their releases. So that's one issue. And then the second issue is that the accounting for the downstream accounts has to do with inflows into Lake Kachuma. And then those inflows are deposited in the downstream accounts, but we're not taking out the water that's being sent downstream for the fish releases. So there's kind of this double counting happening. So CCRB is initiating communications with those downstream water rights holders. We're hoping that we can mutually come up with a new accounting process that makes those water rights releases more fair in terms of who gets allocation on the lake.
Any question on this?
Yes.
How are the fish doing?
The fish, oh, this is like an awesome question, because I have a picture here for you too to answer that question. So in our field trip, we also visited the Hilton Creek stream, which is kind of the stream that goes up close. It goes up into a watershed above Bradbury Dam, and that's really excellent. Thank you. Steelhead habitat. So where the cursor is pointing right now in this picture, that's a red. So that is a steelhead or a trout, southern trout, egg bed nest. Yeah, there we go. So what happened with the fish is during the storm, there was some die-off because of the large amount of debris that initially went downstream, but they've been seeing quite a bit of rebound. There's definitely nesting happening. There's definitely juveniles hatching, and the population looks like it's doing pretty well. Comb staff have gone out with their fisheries program and looked for fish that have become stranded as the river recedes and have relocated them into the mainstream. And the population's looking decent, considering like how much of a change happened to their habitat.
So at the end of the day, though, these are trout. We don't know if they are steelhead. You cannot tell unless you do a DNA on them. So it's complicated, but certainly activity is a positive thing. And it looks like Councilmember Snedden, did you have something to add to that? No. Okay.
Just I think it's more clarification. When you say fish releases, you really mean water for fish.
Yes,
Yes.
that's
You're
correct.
not
Good
releasing
point.
fish. You're releasing
Yes.
water, right? Just-
Very good point. Sorry, we're getting into
Yeah,
jargon
yeah. Just,
here.
it sounds like we're releasing fish. No, we're not fishing, which they could be, but.
Before I jump to the Central Coast Water Authority, Councilmember Snedden is our board member for both COMB and CCRB, so I just wanted to say, like, if you have anything to add or anything like that, happy to hear any updates. Not to put you on the spot.
No, it's always so fantastic to see it summarized by you, because I'm like, that's right, we are doing that. Those are important things. Something to understand is that our participation is a little bit different than the other member agency participation because they have fully elected water boards. And so just understanding your function, my function, city council function. So I'm the voting representative. The city gets, on COMB, we get a vote 2. We're considered a big, and Goleta also gets a vote of 2, and then Carpentry and Montecito each get a vote of 1 for COMB. And so we have the availability of the staff at COMB or CCRB to come and present to Water Commission or to council for closed session items, but I think it's just because we're a little bit different if you ever have questions about that or not. And I'll let you describe what happens with CCWA, and that's Eric Friedman is the representative there, but that's also, then in that capacity we serve similarly. But there's a lot happening. A lot of what happens at CCRB is closed session. discussions. And for those, because our Water Commission doesn't have the ability for closed session, that gets split that way too. So I just wanted to add that little bit about sort of all of our functions. But if at any time there's anything that needs to be presented at Water Commission to give direction or guidance, I'd welcome that too. Thank you.
Awesome, thank you. So moving to our third Joint Powers Authority and off the Kachuma project for a minute, we're going to go to Central Coast Water Authority, or CCWA. And CCWA is another joint powers agency. It was formed in 1991, and its purpose was to finance, construct, manage, and operate regional treatment and conveyance facilities that deliver state water project to its member agencies. It's a little bit larger group because it doesn't just focus on Lake Kachuma, so it has 8 member agencies, including the city. It's also one of 29 state water project contractors, and so that's really valuable to have a seat at the table in terms of the state water project. And Ray Stokes represents us on the state water project contractors, and he's just very, very knowledgeable and very good at what he does. I already described the history of the state water project allocation this year. It's good news. We have 100% allocation, so I'm not going to repeat that. Major initiatives for CCWA, and we talked about this a little bit earlier too, so I'll go over it kind of quickly, but we started out the year looking for supplemental water. We weren't sure that it was going to be a wet year, and so the city and other agencies joined the supplemental purchase program, and Ray was out looking for deals to purchase additional water. As the storms came in, we all quickly jumped out of the supplemental purchase program and worked to both move and reclassify carryover water stored in San Luis Reservoir. And again, this is where the details of what actually happens to the molecules of water aren't 100% clear to me. I'm super excited or appreciative, I guess would be a better word, that we have Ray to do this work for us. But he worked quickly and efficiently to reclassify almost all of the carryover water that CCWA member agencies had into water that wasn't going to spill. And so CCWA as an organization lost very little water when San Luis did actually spill. Again, for the city, we utilized that water to pay back our water debt. Other initiatives that they're working on are focusing on their water management strategy study. And this is similar to the work that we've done here at the city in our Enhanced Urban Water Management Plan, looking at how can we really utilize our state water project resources better. We have lots of water in wet years when we don't really need it, and then it becomes really limited in dry years and expensive. And so how can we create programs that help us take the most advantage of that resource? And so right now we're working to explore groundwater banking opportunities, and both the city and CCWA are working in parallel on that effort. There will be a staff report going to council on June 13th to amend the JPA for Central Coast Water Authority so that they have authority to enter into groundwater banking opportunities. They weren't sure that the language that they have currently really gives them that authority, so they want to clear it up moving forward.
Just a quick question, and it may be relevant or not. On the CCWA, we're moving and reclassifying carryover water. Last year, the county water agency inserted themselves in some fashion relative to approval or review of importing or getting rid of state water. Did that come into play at all this year?
Didn't, because this wasn't a sale or an exchange, that process didn't have to go through approval from the county water agency. We've also been meeting with Matt Young from the county periodically as the water managers in the area, and it seems like the emphasis on the water resources in the county is a little bit less, they're paying less attention now that there's water, essentially. So right now, it doesn't seem to be a threat. We do still have our litigation on those amendments in the past with the county, but there hasn't been any new effort for them to kind of muddle things up.
Great, thanks.
Let's see. The other things operationally that CCWA is working on, there's been really low demand on our portion of the central branch of the state water project because there either was not much water to deliver previously, or now there's a lot of water, but we're not too interested in taking our state water because we're using other sources. And so CCWA has had sort of long residence time in their pipelines with their water, and that's causing some water quality challenges. The water still gets treated, so it's not a water quality concern, but they're trying to balance this idea of delivering small amounts of water to those who need it, water treatment challenges, and then also when we deliver low volumes of water, our electrical costs go up. There's a kind of a economy of scale for delivering more water through the project. So they've really been working to make some improvements operationally, and then sort of organizationally also think about how we bring the water down to decrease the water quality concerns and also decrease the cost with electrical. So that's something that they've been spending quite a bit of time on. They also need a Warren contract to pass their state water project water through Lake Cachuma because it's considered non-project water or non-Cachuma water. And they got an extension last year from Reclamation. They would like to negotiate their long-term contract so that they don't have to kind of year-to-year negotiate extensions, and they've asked to start that process. But that's really driven by Reclamation, and there hasn't been much action there.
Just to understand the first point further better, that's the portion that comes, the water, the pipeline that comes from the state project down to the Central Coast?
Yeah, so this is, well, yeah, I'm sorry. Yeah, so from like Colonial Pass and then down.
Yeah, okay.
Yes,
Okay.
yes. Let's see. And the other thing that they're really working on is succession planning, and I think there's probably things to learn as a water agency as they go through this process. 50% of their staff is eligible to retire in the next 2 years, including their entire executive team. So they're really working to staff up so that they can pass on the knowledge that these experienced employees have, and then also looking at, classification and compensation and how are they going to recruit new talent. So that's a big effort that's happening at CCWA right now. And with that, if you have any other questions, I'm here still.
Any questions or comments?
I was just going to add really quick that it's been around for a while. Bendy White, Councilmember Bendy White, former Councilmember White, wore all three of these hats, and he did a great job. And I had a lot of concern when he stepped down. But I do have to say, Councilmember Sneddon has done a fantastic job representing the city. We were very fortunate to have her and Councilmember Friedman. They've really stepped in. I mean, very complicated issues. I'm not sure how they manage all that and work and all these other things that are on council's agenda, but we are very well represented for water resources, and we are very appreciative to have that kind of support. Yeah, so thank you.
Okay, this is a presentation, right? No recommendation, so thank you very much for that. Very informative. Any public comments?
There's no public comment.
Okay. All right. Moving along to the Water Resources Manager's Report. Mr. Hagmark.
All right, thank you. So I'll start off with the easy stuff. No meeting in June. We do not have any major items that can't wait till July, so enjoy your June off. We will have a changing of the guard in July. We have Commissioner Cooney will become chair, and Commissioner Snyder will become vice chair. We do have to work through some logistical issues because Commissioner Snyder said she will be off in July. She has a conflict, so we'll have to figure out how exactly that works, but I'm sure there's a workaround. And then we'll have our typical workshop in August where we'll meet in person and kind of roll up our sleeves and go through the agenda for the year and talk about what we'd like to accomplish.
What's the date for that workshop?
Good question. I'll look them up while we're talking. Let's see, other ones are next week. Is it next week? Budget presentation. Sneaking up on us fast. May 31st to City Council. So we'll be going through the entire Public Works budget. Obviously, part of that is the water resources part. So we'll be doing that. August 17th, yeah, for the workshop. As I noted earlier, just the electrical rate increases, we had anticipated an increase. I don't know that I anticipated this significant, nor did I expect where they were going to increase it. So I'm going to do some homework on this. I'm trying to prepare for the budget presentation next week and want to give council a good sense of how far off we are with our estimates. As you may recall from our last meeting, we had a failure of the SCE transformer that services both El Estero and DSAL. A temporary one had been set up. The permanent one is now in place. They finished that on May 2nd. Just fantastic work. I will be sending a letter to SCE commending a few of their staff who really stood out in helping us with that. Yesterday, I spoke to the State Water Commission. I have to admit, I didn't know they existed until about 2 months ago when they asked. They were doing a forum on desal. It was interesting. I was one of 5 people that spoke. I was the only one who spoke remotely. Everyone else was able to attend in person, which is always tough to read the audience, especially how it was kind of set up. But it was interesting. The state is, I think, more seriously considering desal in strategic locations and how they might be more supportive of that going forward. So that was nice to hear. And then the last one, as you might guess, it'll be an interesting year. The way I believe SCE sets their rates, they're kind of backwards looking, because this year is going to be an abundance of hydro, which we haven't seen in the last few years. So I've got questions about whether SCE's rates will indeed come down when there's more hydro on the grid. I have no idea, but certainly will be a good year for that. Looking at our water usage, there's a few things I wanted to kind of point out that are kind of unique. So water usage for April just got wrapped up. We were seeing water usage come back to what we actually planned or thought the community would use. But April revenues were down because they reflect water sold in March. So there's kind of a lag to that.
Also, to add to that, in this spreadsheet that we're looking at, April assumes a 15% conservation from the Enhanced Urban Water Management Plan demands. So for revenues, we were planning the Enhanced Urban Water Management Plan demands, but this was put together ahead of this winter, and we were preparing to go into conservation with another dry year. So when you're comparing the total production of 729 to 705, that 705 planned is a 15% reduction from normal demands.
Got it. Okay. That's helpful because the narrative that's kind of going on here is as of April, we're about $2.8 million behind where we had budgeted in water revenues and about $500,000 behind in wastewater. And kind of the story is here, I think we should kind of level off there. I don't think that the next couple months it's going to get worse. I think water demands will start to pick up. But we are watching this pretty closely. I think it just comes at a difficult time when we have inflation going through the roof. I also, at some point, will be talking to you guys about water main costs that have been just exponentially going up. I'm going to be sharing that with Water Commission, still pulling that data together, but kind of street paving costs have been going up and water main costs outside of, I think, normal inflation that we've been seeing. Hopefully there will be some cap to that as well. And with that, I'm here to answer any questions. I think we've got this presentation off to you guys yesterday. If you had any chance to look at it, if there's any specific information you'd like me to speak to, I'm happy to answer any questions.
Comments, questions? Yeah.
I do have a couple of questions. One of them, so revenues are down, but I would imagine that costs are also down because we're using Cachuma water as opposed to having to use other sources. So does that kind of, I mean, it's not necessarily one-to-one, but it probably is helping. Huh?
That is part of the, I'm working on how to, it's a good topic because I'm working on how to discuss that with the community because, for example, state water, we still have to pay our
Our
$4 million,
annual, yeah.
doesn't matter how much water we get, right? That's kind of a flat fee. Desal's kind of a similar thing. There's the electrical variable, right? We were off for 2 months, so there will be that savings. But for the most part, all of our operating costs, we have to pay our contracted cost to IDE. So there isn't a huge swing. We do not have to do a barge on Cachuma, which was good. But I don't think that we had budgeted. We had said that we would go to reserves for that, so that's just something we do not have to do. So that's the way I'd like to describe it is rates aren't going to go up as high as they might have if it had stayed dry. And instead, we're really trying to just react to the inflation that we've been seeing in chemicals and electrical that have been going up pretty dramatically. So, yeah, not really a safe.
Then the other comment is, if we could move the July meeting to June, because I'm also going to be away in July, so it'd be useful if we could do that, but
So
I don't know at this point, but something
yeah,
to
the July
consider.
items aren't going to be ready in June, but I appreciate, is there anybody else who's not going to be here in July? Because that may,
I'm here.
okay,
I'm here.
okay, so we'll have a quorum.
Sometimes I get those
Okay.
last minute business things.
You can't go anywhere.
I know.
Go ahead.
Can I, for this one, I think it's the third page. Can you just step through how to read this? Like the orange line is our new target, or I won't try to guess. Will you
Yeah,
step
no
through this
problem.
one?
So this is a graph that's kind of grown with us and with increasing regulations over time. So originally we tracked the blue line, which is gallons per capita per day overall in the city. And then the red line was our 20 by 2020 conservation target. And so you can see that in about 2015, we dropped significantly below that and we easily met our red 20 by 2020 conservation target. Now the state is getting away from looking at gallons per capita per day as a metric overall, and they're more interested in residential gallons per capita per day. So we look at just our residential water use, which is the green data that you see at the bottom of the chart. And the orange line represents the targets. They're still not finalized by the state. The State Water Resources Control Board is working on them, but these are this is kind of where everybody's coalescing, so we feel pretty confident that this is what we'll be looking at under the new AB 606 and SB 1668 residential GPCD target. And that target does go down over time, so in 5-year increments, so it'll get lower. In 2025, it'll drop, and then it drops again in 2030. But either way, you can see our green lines compared to the orange are still very below those targets, so we feel pretty confident that we'll be able to meet all those targets.
Thank you. So that orange line is a residential target.
Correct. So yeah, just
Okay,
residential
so it's
gallons
not
per
for the
capita per
blue
day.
line. I was thinking like, how is it we're magically meeting it? But we're the green line.
Yeah, so
okay,
compare
thank
red
you.
to blue and green to orange.
Thank you.
Sure.
Go ahead.
Okay, couple questions. Go back one slide, just, this is a quick one which I didn't answer before. When did Montecito water demands come in terms of our agreement?
So we started producing water from Montecito Water District in January 2022. But this graphic here is just city demands. It doesn't include Montecito.
It doesn't include Montecito?
Correct.
Okay, this is, okay. That really was my question, whether it included Montecito
Yeah.
or not. Okay, my second one, and it's, again, just, we're an enterprise fund, so I'm assuming there are no impacts from the general fund budget shortfall directly upon the water and wastewater funds. How about indirectly in terms of increased administrative costs from the general fund?
Great question. Yes, so we've added the Sustainability and Resiliency Department. We've added now a Human Resources Department. We've added an IT department. Now, these were ones that were kind of divisions within the city, so they're now kind of elevating them. So internal overhead charges have gone up pretty significantly to the enterprises. So airport, waterfront, water resources. So pretty significant jump. I don't have that.
I went out looking for line item numbers, but I just was curious, watching from afar, whether it has filtered into
Yeah.
the overhead costs or administrative overhead costs.
Yeah, and we're definitely seeing that. It's a big jump. Where we're really excited is to see it in IT. It's been one of those areas where we just haven't kept up.
Yeah.
And it really kind of muddles trying to move forward with any AMI being an example. It's been a struggle. And we're hopeful with this new department and resources that they can be more efficient now and kind of work to staff appropriately, because I think they were still kind of staffed around an old, outdated model of IT support.
Good. And my last one, just a comment. I want to thank Chair Young. Good year, Jeff. I think you
Yes.
were a great chair, so I appreciated your work all year long.
Well, thank you. It's fun. Yeah.
Chair Young delivered. He got rid of the drought.
Way to go, Jeff.
Of course. I wave my magic wand. You know.
No pressure received.
I was chair on the water board for about 9 straight years. And then for about 4 or 5, I wasn't. And then coming back into this, I was forgetting a few formalities that we do, like public comment. Yeah. Small items like that. Anyway, all right. So, any public comment on this item? Have I already asked for that?
There's no public comment.
Great, okay. All right, we are adjourned.